Boxing's rising stars take center stage.
Let's go, we ready.
They can't stand the way we face our face, you face our face.
First, WBA champ Jamal Shango James looks to defend his title.
This kid is spectacular.
And he goes down.
Then, Jaron Boots Ennis hopes to continue his meteoric rise.
18 knockdowns in his last 9 fights.
It's a night of welterweight phenoms live from Las Vegas.
We have a very special guest for you guys today. El Jefe, Steven Espinoza, president of Showtime Sports. Steve, man, thank you in your busy schedule for making time to talk to me and Jack today.
Are you kidding? I just want to make real clear from the outset, this was not a requirement. You know, this was not a condition. This was not forced upon you. There's legitimate. I'm a legitimate guest here. All right.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Jack. When you got El Presidente on your show, that means your show is doing well and it's not going nowhere.
Just having them on our show, I could exhale a little bit. We got a little sense of security.
Absolutely. Hey, well, let's get to it. Steve, you came on set one day when we had ad reads and we were trying to do the Homeland ad reads. What were your thoughts after hearing me fuck up 18 times and Jack have to catch himself a few times? Where did you think the future of this show was going, if there was a future for it?
Look, it didn't change my idea of the future of the show. Everybody has their strengths. You know, not everybody's good at everything. So, you know, it's sort of like, you know, all that big team around you, they're excellent at putting you in positions to succeed. That just wasn't a position in which you were succeeding at the time.
Hey, I still don't think I know how to say it. Was it Manny? How you say it last?
Patinkin.
Mandy Patinkin. Yeah. See, I couldn't get it. It took me like 8-9 shots, and the boss is sitting right there. I'm like, fuck, we might not have a job when we get done. God damn it. But on a real note, you know, tell me your thoughts. Obviously, Showtime Basketball being fairly new before we jumped on board. You know, you guys struck gold. We struck gold. What have been your thoughts over the last 2 years of the growth of the show heading into season 3?
I mean, being completely candid, you know, we had high hopes for the show, but this has exceeded everything we really could have wished for. And I'm not saying this because I'm on with you guys. I've said it many times. I mean, you guys are one of the top sports podcasts. You got there within the first year. And you know you've arrived, because I hear this all the time. I'm not sure if people say it to you, but I get pitches all the time from people saying, well, it's all the smoke of blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You know, we want to be all the smoke of the NFL, you know, and when you start setting the stage, when you start, you know, setting the curve for everybody else, you know, you've made an impact in a very, very crowded field, because as you guys know, you know, that's the biggest challenge in podcasting is how do you stand out? And you guys have hit it out of the park in that respect.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that.
Right,
coming November 4th, the Best of All the Smoke returns to the actual Showtime linear. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, we always envisioned this, that in success, it would incubate other projects, you know, and doing a best of on the channel is an easy one. And even, you know, regular fans of this show who have seen these, you know, I hear really good feedback because we're packaging them up a little bit, you know, differently. You know, 15 episodes every Thursday starting November 4th, you know, paired with Jesus and Marrow. And, you know, this is an opportunity to sort of, you know, put a slightly different format, revisit some of the best of y'all stuff. And we're happy to do it. It belongs on the network.
One thing that I really love over here, and obviously shout out Brian Daly, who's listening to this right now. I just love the creativity. I think, you know, like you said, Stephen, we're able to package stuff up a little different. You know what I mean? We're not just giving you the same raw cut of something else, but we're able to package it up, slice it up, and different. And then the one thing I appreciate is to me, we're more than a podcast, and I think we've continued to prove that. But you guys have allowed us to be creative within this space, because like you said, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of podcasts out there. And I think what obviously Jack and I's dynamic is special, but you guys allow us to be creative within this space. And to me, that's what continues to allow us to raise the bar. And now people are trying to emulate what we're doing.
Yeah, you're right. Calling it a podcast is sort of underselling it. What you guys have done either with the Iverson Classic or starting to highlight HBCUs, That's not just sitting down in front of the microphone and going stream of consciousness. You guys are creative types, and again, exceeded our expectations. Brian Daly was, when he brought it to me, he was sort of your biggest advocate, and we had high hopes. But again, you guys have exceeded that, not just in what you've achieved, but in the creative, what you're bringing to the table outside of the podcast.
Right.
KG Doc premieres Friday, November 12th. What was your first impression of KG when you met him? And what can people expect from this doc as well? 2 questions.
Well, it's funny. You guys know KG, so feel free to disagree. But there's a lot of guys who, on the field and off the field, or on the court and off the court, are different guys. Some guys transform. You step onto the court, you transform into your alter ego. Dame Lillard, he's a beast on the court. He's pretty quiet off the court. KG, I was surprised to find out when we first met him. He's that guy 24 hours a day. I feel like KG rolls out of bed just hyped to be up in the morning, talking loud, in your face, intensity, and it's great energy. I met him, strangely enough, when we were on an NBA trip. It was a preseason trip. The Nets were touring China, and we were all on a flight from JFK to it was either Shanghai or Beijing, and I got introduced on that flight, and we just started talking boxing. Pretty soon they had to separate us because we were making too much noise and keeping the rest of the plane apart. And that's when at that point, we started talking about it, the doc, and now probably 5-6 years later, we started talking about it seriously. And at this point, you see, it's a good reminder. KG, it's been so long since KG came into the league. People have forgotten what a trailblazer he was, whether it's financially, whether it's, setting the stage for more players to come from high school, the kinds of things that he did. I mean, AI gets a lot of credit, rightfully so, but KG was the same kind of trailblazer.
Right, agreed. Shout out to our guy Eric Newman. I've been working diligently for a long time on this KG doc. We know it's dropping. What could our fans expect from this doc?
It's the personal side. I mean, there's one thing. We probably could have done a 8-part doc with KG because aside from his energy, you guys know he's got to be one of the best storytellers I've ever encountered.
Absolutely.
I mean, the way he tells stories, you just sit there, and before you know it, it's a 45-minute story, and you're on the ground laughing and crying and thinking, and that's what it is. I mean, it really is. The toughest part of making that doc is figuring out what goes in and what doesn't go in, because you've got 3 or 4 docs, in his life.
Absolutely. 2022 is going to be a big time for Showtime Sports, Showtime Basketball in particular. We're welcoming Paul Pierce to the family. KG's already in the mix. KG's got a podcast coming out. Can you speak to some projects that our fans should be expecting in 2022?
I'll go in a slightly different direction, but I'll bring it back to you. We have a John McEnroe doc, coming up, and that's one that really hasn't been visited in a really heavy duty full way. And I sort of feel like McEnroe was the Matt Barnes or the Steven Jackson of tennis at that point. He was, he didn't care what you thought. He went out there, did things his way. It's been a while. Look, that's early 80s was his real heyday. And people think about tennis and it's, the white outfits and having tea at Wimbledon and things like that. That's not John McEnroe. John McEnroe was a G. I mean, all you have to do is go to the Garden and see what kind of hero, McEnroe is still to this day, to realize how he sort of changed tennis and actually became a New York City icon. That's hard to do as a tennis player.
Right. Agreed.
We've got another one from Kevin Durant, which is right up your guys' alley. He did one for us last year on PG County and looking at, how that became a breeding ground for some great players. He's looking at, he and his partner, Rich Kleiman, are looking at New York City point guards, in that history. And more interesting, like asking the question, why, we can all think of when you say New York City point guard, there's a particular type that you can think of. And why is that? And there's a lot of reasons sort of about New York City and growing up and playing in the city and what kind of game you develop here.
Mm-hmm. Like that. And then KG podcast, am I hearing that correctly as well?
Same thing, there's just so much good content. It's a waste. It might end up being the world's longest podcast. I don't know how to cut that down. It just might be a continuous stream of consciousness for hours and hours on end. But it won't be boring, that's for sure.
Speak to, obviously, I felt like it was unjust. Paul Pierce was let go of ESPN, for stuff they thought didn't fit on brand. I think he was a great pickup for our team and our family. Speak to what we can see or expect from Paul Pierce.
I feel like the truth is a great nickname. Obviously it applied to him on the court, but he fits right in with you guys and a lot of our other talent, a lot of our other programming, where he's not afraid of the truth. And where a lot of guys, when that happened, where that sort of thing happened and he left ESPN, a lot of guys would have shut down. Not Paul Pierce. He addressed it continuously, wasn't apologetic, and he was just, him, and we're happy to give him another opportunity because he's a unique voice.
Absolutely. Yes. And last but not least, the education of Matt Barnes.
Absolutely.
What's up with that, El Jefe?
Look, like I said, that was more than we bargained for. We didn't know we were going to get a TV star, a scripted series, got a role in there. Couldn't do it without Stack as well. And I don't think there's anything like it in television. I can't think of another one that's like it because it's not really about sports. It's about a guy who played sports, but a really interesting guy dealing with the transition from one part of his life to another. And again, it's all real. Like the stuff, it's one of those situations. One of the things I say sometimes about boxing is it's hard to do a good fictional movie about boxing because the stuff that happens in real life is way crazier than anything you can make up fictionally.
Right.
And I think that applies to Matt Barnes' life. Like we don't need to make stuff up. Let's just take the stuff that is actually happening, and that's an interesting series right there.
Yes. No, I'm excited, man, to be starring and producing in my own show on this platform, man. It's been a dream come true. So, again, we appreciate that. Jack is going to be obviously right there alongside of me making his acting debut as well. So, man, we're excited to get to work to that early next year. Moving on to boxing. How has the boxing landscape changed since you came into it, and what is it like present day?
Well, look, it's the same thing that is affecting society and other sports. And I'd say the biggest thing is social media. And not just the existence of social media, how it's changed the dynamic. It has given athletes in general an independence, an autonomy, an ability to sort of directly engage, build their fan base, get their story out, and really even monetize it, starting with, college now all the way through their career. So no longer is a fighter reliant on promoters and traditional media to be able to get his story out, to build a fan base, to speak his truth. And I think that's a really powerful thing. Now, it's gone already so far that, now you have people who have built huge fan bases like a Jake Paul, who have now used that to leverage their way into the sport. I would never have predicted that. Look, I think it's an interesting development. There's definitely a lot of interest out there in the business, but that would not have been possible without social media.
Agreed.
Let's talk about these Philly fighters. Two guys that I'm close friends with and guys I'm fans of, Jared Enos and Stephen Cool Boy Fulton. What do you think about these guys and the fights they got coming up?
Philly has a great history. You talk about New York City point guards and, there are certain guys that come to mind, whether Rod Strickland or Kenny Anderson or Mark Jackson. When you say Philly fighter, you think of a gritty, tough guy. Joe Frazier, Bernard Hopkins, probably the two biggest names. And in Jaron Ennis and Stephen Fulton, you have two of the guys who could very well be carrying the sport over the next few years. I mean, for my money, I think Jaron Ennis is arguably, the best fighter under age 25, in the sport. And it's gotten really tough to get him fights. because he has not shown a weakness yet. Stephen Fulton is a really exciting young fighter as well. He's in a big fight on November 27th, unifying the title against Brandon Figueroa. And you talk to these two guys, Stephen's a big personality. Jerron's a little bit more reserved, but once they're in the ring, you see the dog in them. The dog comes out, and that's where you see that Philly fighter.
November 6th, shout out to Isaiah and Carter Barnes. They will be 13 that day. But also another important thing on that day is Canelo steps back in the ring versus Plant. What intrigues you most about this matchup? The
consensus pound for pound number one fighter in the sport. Pretty clearly the biggest draw in the sport. It's the opportunity to see LeBron, Steph Curry of boxing. But this particular fight, the first time we've got an undisputed 168-pound champion, at least potentially. Never been anybody in that division that has done that before, had all four belts. And it's only been happened across any division 6 times at all. So, people complain too many champions. Well, look, whoever wins that fight, they are the champion. They've got all the belts in the division. And that's a big thing for Canelo, even with everything he's accomplished. And it's even a bigger thing for Plant to be on the world stage. But the interesting thing about Plant is we don't know how good he is. He is undefeated, but he has not faced anyone of the caliber of Canelo. So I don't think anybody can really tell you what's going to happen. Canelo has obviously only got the one loss to Floyd Mayweather. He's been dominant elsewhere. But here we go. We have a little bit of an unknown quantity. The only way to tell how good a guy is, you put him in with an elite fighter and see what happens.
Tank has come a long way. We both big fans of Tank, man. We watched him grow up. He's a pay-per-view star now. Talk about the energy that Tank has, about the energy that he's bringing into his fights now and becoming a pay-per-view star.
For a guy who's kind of quiet, borderline shy sometimes outside of the ring, he lets his fight talk for him. And people have sort of said, and even Mike Tyson has said it, people call him a mini Tyson. And I think Mike has even said, hey, that's the guy who's closest to my style nowadays. That's really high praise, and he's done it in a variety of different weight classes, over the last 10 fights. The record of his opponents, over 250 wins and 11 losses. So he's not fighting bums. He's fighting accomplished guys and just steamrolling them. So look, Rolly, this is one of those things, it's a good fight. There's a championship at stake, but when there's a personal rivalry, when stuff has gotten personal, it's a whole different level, especially when you're talking boxing.
Yes. This is a 2-part question. What's been the biggest change you've seen in Tank, and thoughts on the back and forth trash talking at the press conference in LA just recently?
It's interesting to see a fighter grow up, and grow up before. The first time I met Tank was in DC. I believe he was on the off TV part of an undercard, a Broner undercard, 2016, I believe. And to say you're fighting off TV underneath Broner, and he's a baby-faced little kid. He looked like he was about 13 at the time. And fast forward 5 years, and he's carrying his own pay-per-views. He's got, Drake and every other, rapper, and got that friendship with Lil Baby. And, he's just grown and matured. And again, he and Jerron Ennis are, in terms of the young fighters, are really the future of the sport.
Thoughts on the trash talking that took place in LA just
well,
recently?
First, before we get to the trash talking, I have to give respect to the mink coat. You have to.
It was hot out there. It was hot out there that day too.
It was hot. And just if you're going to do the mink coat, just do away with the shirt underneath. That's what I respect.
Chest out. Got to be chest out.
That sent the message of how, he's coming into it. His trash talking has generally been on point, especially social media. I don't think that the trash talking at the press conference was his, his best foot forward. But you follow up, you check out social media, he more than makes up for it.
He's nice on there, yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, he been saying a lot. I think Tank gonna knock some sense into him though. What's next for Jake Paul? How could you reflect on his showing in Cleveland against Woodley?
He came in and handled business. I know he would have liked to get the stoppage, continued that, but Woodley, he's a dog as well. He was not going to go out easy. He's an elite athlete, an elite combat sport athlete. I think he carried himself really well. I know Jake wasn't happy with it because he wants the stoppage. He wants to put on the show every single time. But I think the next one, people are sort of clamoring. They're saying, when is Jake going to fight an actual full-time boxer? I think we're getting pretty close to that, with Tommy Fury likely to be the next opponent, Tyson Fury's little brother. He's 7-0. He's definitely a professional fighter. So now everybody who's sort of saying, okay, when is he going to fight an actual boxer? Well, you're probably going to get your wish before the end of the year.
So Woodley got the tattoo for nothing.
Yeah.
Oh!
We'll see. And I want to see, I want to see it in person. I think there's some questions. Or is it a real tattoo, with permanent ink, that kind of thing. But there are ways to do that. But look, I wouldn't put it out of the question. But I think Jake has other business to take care of, and that's to prove that he can take on a real boxer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Facts.
Top 3 fights you've witnessed in person.
Good question.
It's a great question. So before we get there, anytime you're talking about this kind of thing, you got to talk about what are the criteria. So personally, I think what's at stake. Not just championships. They're personal rivalries. Is it fighting a small arena? Or are you fighting in front of 90,000 people? There's obviously the action of the fight itself, and for me, talking live, the atmosphere has a lot to do with it. So in no particular order, I would say, it's a trilogy. I'll pick one of them. Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales. They fought 3 times. Fought 3 times. The first one was amazing. These are 2 guys who hated each other. But I'm a Barrera fan. So I would go with the third fight in 2004, which was the rubber match. They each split the first 2. So that was just all out action, a very personal fight, start to finish. I would say largely because of the atmosphere. I would say Mayweather Hatton.
Yes.
Mayweather
I was
Hatton.
there.
Oh, you remember all those British people, most of them drunk, singing. I've never been.
There's only one Ricky Hatton.
Exactly. I've never been to the World Cup, but I imagine that's what a World Cup sounds like. And the most amazing thing is Floyd knocked him out cold, and the singing didn't stop for a second. Like it just continued without a breath. Nobody even took a breath. It just continued the whole thing. And talking to some of the guys at the MGM, they, those British fans, those Hatton fans, they drank the MGM out of beer. They literally ran out of beer even before they got to fight night. Those funny as hell. And then the other 2, I can't really. I've got to go with 2. I would say Oscar De La Hoya, Fernando Vargas.
That's a good one.
Because that one was, again, the personal rivalry, the animosity. I mean, 2 guys who been circling each other for their whole careers, running into each other on the street, in clubs, like in the same area. And then more recently, that was way back in, I think, 2002, Klitschko Joshua. Great fight. Wembley Stadium, 90,000.
I was going to say that was in the UK, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like 90,000 people. I've never seen an atmosphere like that. And then the fight delivered. Both guys went down. Joshua, stopped Klitschko in the 11th, and that was a phenomenal atmosphere. I don't know. We'll see again 90,000 people in a crowd like that.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you for taking some time. Before we leave, again, Jack and I from the bottom of our hearts, man. Thank you guys, you and Brian and the rest of the Showtime team, for believing in us, giving us an opportunity. To be honest with you, we didn't even know what a podcast was when I approached Brian about doing a podcast. I think, like you said, we've formed a great team around us and really built something special, and want to continue to help build this Showtime Sports platform and Showtime as a whole, man. So thank you guys for the opportunity to, allow me and Jack to thrive in this setting.
Yes, sir.
Well, you guys, you don't have to thank us, because you guys earned it all the way. I mean, all the accolades, the audience, that's all on your shoulders. It's all in your hard work. So, back at you. It's phenomenal what you guys have built in a very small amount of time. And when people thought that they had heard every type of voice, in sports journalism and podcasting and television, you guys came in and flipped it and started delivering something that's unlike anything else out there.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, boss man. Thank you.
Well, Steve, thank you. And I think Jack will see you at the fight in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. We'll see you.
Yes, sir. I will be
Give
there.
the boys my best, Matt. Tell them happy birthday.
Boxing's rising stars take center stage.
Let's go, we ready. They can't stand the way we face our face, you face our face.
First, WBA champ Jamal Shango James looks to defend his title.
This kid is spectacular.
And he goes down.
Then, Jaron Boots Ennis hopes to continue his meteoric rise.
18 knockdowns in his last 9 fights.
It's a night of welterweight phenoms live from Las Vegas.